Okay, welcome everyone. In this session, we're going to talk about the context close to key theme that you've heard probably in several of the classes, whether it's CDVDM or Data Vault Day or whatever you're working with. It could be Elm. The idea of context close to key is an important aspect of Data Vault and ensemble modeling in general. So let's take a quick look at this broader model that we have here. So now in this model, you can see that we have a sale, and no surprise, right? This is a model we've worked with quite a bit. Sale, store, product, employee. We have the store class, region, country, vendor type on vendor, and etc. Now, when we say context close to key, one of the things that means is we're going to move, if we can, we're going to move things that describe a concept, right? Or classify or describe a concept into a satellite directly on that hub, because instead of having a link to it, we have to hop along to get to it. We would just want to have that context very close to it if we can. So let's look at a couple options for that on this particular model. The first one, if you look at the top left, the country. Now it could be that the region could just be having a satellite that has country in it. So we're going to just peel that one off, okay, and put country and a satellite on region. You then have down on the bottom right, you'll notice that we have this employee type. So the employee type might be full-time or part-time, right? Well, full-time or part-time, remember, employee type is only there to describe employee. And one of the reasons why it might have been its own table is because we want to control it, which again in the warehouse we don't care much about. All the data we load has already been created. We're just copying it in. And or we're afraid that there might be hundreds or thousands of them. Well, we know that there can't be, because if there were, then we wouldn't be able to manage our business. So the rule of 7 has now come into play. So I can also take that one and put the employee type right on context close to key on the employee. The next one is vendor type, very similar thing. The vendor type might just be, are they international or local, whatever. This is just describing vendor. So again, I can take that hub away, right? And just move that into context describing vendor. Now, if I make my way across the model again, customer and customer category. Customer category, now remember, it could even be that there's a dozen of these different categories that you use, or it could be 3, whatever. You can see it as a candidate for context close to key because it says customer category, right? It doesn't say general categorization of any concept. It's specific to customer, which means it's a good candidate for also being context, describing it directly, right? That makes our life a lot easier, okay? Now, if you look at store has store class. And again, that's another one of those things. When you see like type, class, category, especially if it's specific to one CBC, it's a good candidate. Hopefully, right? The rule of 7 is working here well, and we know that the classifications of a store, right? Maybe it's small, medium, large, whatever, are also things that we can put directly into a satellite to keep them there. Now here's an interesting thing. If you're familiar with dimensional modeling, sometimes we refer to rolling in outliers. That is to say that you could have a relationship to one concept that also has a relationship to one further away concept. That could have been the case on store with region. So let's say we have the Southwest region, the Northwest region, Southeast, whatever. We have a couple of regions, maybe there's 4 of them. Each of those regions is in a country, of course, but we could actually roll them both in as just context under store. So we could actually end up with just having store, and then it has a satellite with both region and country. Now, think about that for a minute. That's definitely kind of you've flattened it a bit, right? Because there'll be some redundancy. The region, right? If you look at all the satellite records, 4 or 5 regions might be in the same country. That's fine. They're still unique to the store, because the store, you're going to say, what region am I in? What country am I in? Right? Those are questions you're going to ask context that describes that store itself. So that's why it's important to keep it there. Now you may have noticed in this model that I have a separate link to employee. So if you were really paying attention, you say, hey, why is there a separate link to employee? Well, in the case here, what we were assuming is that employee was rare. In other words, people came into the store and bought something, or they went online and purchased something. But either way, they either used an automated system at the store where they just walked in and checked themselves out, or online, of course, they had no employee interaction. So it's very rare to have an employee involved. That's why it is that way. But of course, if it were a traditional store where the employee was always involved or expected to be always involved, exceptions are always okay, then of course it would be part of the foundational sale link, the one that we refer to in classes, the header link. Now, I also added region out there floating around in space. And of course, the reason I did that is because this can be part of that kind of standalone disconnected pattern. In other words, it could be that I want to keep track of detailed information about region. And because I pulled it out as a hub and made it just context in the store, I may want to keep it in case I occasionally look it up to find out what are some of the details about that region. Interestingly enough too, because that's something that you could soft code in your business. In other words, it's not driven necessarily by a government entity or a standard. You may reconfigure your regions, and then of course you want to keep the history of that. So whatever, for whatever reason you keep it, remember it's a disconnected pattern. It doesn't change the fact that you're going to keep the region as well as the country as satellite context on store, okay? So now, last thing to make a point on this is, look, we've got 7 concepts here, right? And in each one of those 7 concepts, we now have context close to key. And of course, if you were rolling into reporting, each one of these circles is kind of its own dimension, right? It's its own dimension, and all of the attributes in that dimension are really primarily contained in the satellite. It could be, of course, that there's other linked relations, but now we've kind of created a very practical pattern, makes good sense for data warehousing, and at the same time, it is queued up to support your reporting and dimensional reporting needs in a better way than before. So there we go. We'll see you again in the next lesson. I hope this was helpful for you.